the graduate admissions committee quite a few times during my time here. And I did my own grad school in biophysics. And the goal of this panel is going to be to tell you some information, but mostly answer all of your questions about the logistics of graduate school, why you should go, how you should go, the process of application, what happens once you get in, and so forth. All right, so let's do introductions. Brian, could you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Brian Camley. I work on modeling and theory of a lot of different processes in the physics of cell biology, especially cell motility and sensing. I was trained as a physicist originally, but now I'm in the joint between the Department of Physics and Astronomy and the Department of Biophysics here at Johns Hopkins.
All right, and Hernan?
Hello, I'm Hernan Garcia. I'm at UC Berkeley in the departments of physics and also of molecular and cell biology. And I actually went to grad school in physics, not knowing much about biophysics. I thought I was going to do quantum optics or one of those things. And that's where I discovered biophysics. And I served also on a bunch of admissions committees for the biophysics program, for the physics program, and for the molecular and cell biology program.
And Josh?
Hi, I'm Josh Shavitz. I'm currently past chair of DBIO. I'm director of graduate studies of our new biophysics graduate program at Princeton University, which we started a couple of years ago. And I am chair of the admissions committee in physics and have been that for a few years. So I'm pretty deep into graduate admissions and things. I also like to run workshops like this at conferences and places I visit pretty routinely. So I'm excited to get to hear from some of you, and hopefully we can answer some of your questions about the big unknown that is PhD.
All right, and Arvin?
Hey folks, I'm Arvin Murugan. I'm in the physics department at the University of Chicago, trained as a physicist, but work on both physics and biology problems. My affiliation is entirely in physics, but I'm also deeply involved with the graduate program in biophysics here. And I've been on the admissions committee of both for many years now. So happy to answer questions about any of those things.
All right. Okay, so I thought it might be fun to start kind of on a personal side and ask you guys to think back, ask our panelists to think back to when you were applying for grad school and what your thoughts and decisions were, and whether you feel like you made any big gaffes or maybe any like really good things you did while applying for grad school that you would want to share.
Amy, I think you should just call on people.
Oh.
That's better. Otherwise, we're going to all talk.
Right, Josh, I hear you volunteering. Go for it.
Okay. Okay, so when I went to grad school, I wanted to be a particle experimentalist. So I only applied to schools that had their own accelerators, which was 3. Thankfully, Stanford also had biophysics, because I discovered pretty early on I actually didn't really enjoy particle physics, despite the fact that it's kind of my family business. So anyway, so I went into biophysics. I would say I have made most major decisions in my life, mostly with my gut. I visited, several schools, and there was really one where the students seemed excited and engaged and just really into the science and life as a PhD student, and that resonated a lot with me. And that's where I went. And I think that aspect of PhD is extremely important. If you love the science in an intellectual sense, but you don't love the community or the way the program is sort of run or the way the people are, you probably won't do good science, even though you like it. And so it really is a mix of the kind of personal aspects and the intellectual aspects. And it's 5-6 years of your life. It's a pretty important chunk.
Very true. Arvin?
I was going to say something similar, so let me just add. I feel like the one thing I did do right in picking grad school was I tried to pick a place where there wasn't just one potential mentor in that area, but multiple mentors. Part of the reason was you never know who it's going to work out with. But the second reason is what Josh said, which is if there's a community of people doing the kind of science you want to do, you're going to benefit from that community of grad students. If you're the only person doing that at a place, you're going to learn much less. And so that community aspect, I cannot overemphasize. The mistake I made, I feel, was similar to Josh, except in that I was very sure I knew which narrow subfield of physics I wanted to do. And so I really didn't pay any attention to any other faculty, any other talks, courses, and anything else, and went after one thing. And, you know, you never know what life throws at you, and I'm not in that field anymore. And it would have been a little less painful if I had paid more attention to the science around me.
Fair enough. Hernan, do you have any stories you want to share from the distant past?
I mean, my case was different because I did my undergrad in Argentina, and people did not go that much out of the country for a PhD. So like I didn't even have resources to figure out, you know, what an application looks like. So I just applied to a bunch of places, and I didn't even know, you know, that I didn't quite understand that you got paid to be in grad school and all of that. But I just thought, you know, this sounds like a fun opportunity to do science. And you know, it is, and I ended up choosing, you know, I applied to Berkeley where I'm now and where I make decisions about who gets in, and I didn't get in, which is pretty funny. And I did try to, when I started to be open-minded about what I wanted to do, even though I went in with one specific idea. And I think that paid off because, for example, there was, and there is still no biophysics in the physics department at Caltech, where I did my PhD. So I think exploring in general is a good idea. Yeah, and I think I just want to second the point of like finding a good community, but also finding a great mentor. I think, you know, one thing I tell a lot of students is like, it's obviously your heart needs to be in that particular topic, let's say in biophysics, but within biophysics that you entertain. But it's so much more important to find the right mentor that is going to help you become a great scientist during your PhD.
All right, and Brian?
I think you'll hear the same set of mistakes from me, which is that I made the mistake of, again, like I didn't know quite what I was trying to do. So the other mistake was I applied to a small number of programs, and this is the sort of thing where you know, I now work on, you know, statistics of small number events, among other things, and you know, the error bars of getting into 2 out of the 5 programs that I applied to successfully make me think I got a little lucky in that process. And the element that I think I really did in choosing things well was also similar to Josh, which is that I chose a lot based off of the culture of the department, and sort of when I went to a visit, you know, the people who were talking a lot about like science and had interesting questions about science and really were excited about that, as opposed to the people who were talking all the time about, you know, test scores or how competitive it is to work with certain mentors or things like that. There were definitely departments that had better and worse cultures about things like that. And I felt that that was really important.
Very true. All right. Okay, so maybe at this point we'll zoom out and ask the obvious question that should be on the minds of all of our attendees, which is what are the pros and cons of going to grad school to begin with, particularly if you're interested in biophysics? Should everyone be applying? Should very few people be applying? Is it even worth it? What are you giving up by applying? What are you gaining by applying? All right. So maybe I'll start with something that Hernan brought up that I guess is not necessarily obvious to all students at the undergrad stage. You do get paid for going to grad school. So this is the end of your education where you or your parents or somebody was forking over massive amounts of money to get educated. At this point, you start getting paid to get educated. So it's kind of a unique time in your life. You still get educated, you get paid for doing it. So that can be a pro. It can be a con if your other options are going somewhere else where you get paid a lot more. All right. Having said that, I don't know, Josh, do you have profound things to say about pros and cons?
You can't always start with me. I'll answer this one and then someone else goes first. I would say if you want a career in research, then you basically need a PhD. It is hard to do serious research, even in industry, with just a bachelor's or even a master's. It's not impossible, but it often, in biotech, in pharma, in other kinds of industries, will kind of cap how you can move up in the organization on the research side of things, and even other side of things. So my wife has a PhD in neuroscience. She now works in the kind of medical writing part of pharma. And everyone at her level and above has some sort of doctorate or equivalent degree. So you really need those if you're going to go into research. If you're going into academia, it's required to proceed in academic things. If you just like to solve problems for fun, there are these great consulting firms that, as Elena said, will pay you 10 times more out of the gate than you'll make for a very long time in academia. But you're solving someone else's problems. And the beauty of research is you get to work on the problems that you care about most, often the problems that you thought up yourself, your own kinds of problems. And so I think that's the major trade-off. And then, there's lots of opportunities that a physics or biophysics undergrad degree can give you that don't require a PhD. And those are just fine, so it just depends, I think, on what your long-term trajectory, is.
Yeah, if I can piggyback on that as well, I think the key there is if you want to define your own problems, whether you're a faculty member somewhere or you're chief technical officer or you're whatever high level of science in the research arm of Google or anything in industry, if you're the one defining the problems, chances are you will need a PhD to get that position. If you are solving other people's problems, sometimes you do not need that. All right, I think this would be easier. If you guys want to raise your hand, I can see you if you have anything to say so I can pick. Or I'm going to volunteer other people.
Well, I guess, I think that's great in terms of doing a PhD or not. There's also the question, I think, of biophysics versus physics, especially given that this is a DBIO, and that's always, that I think it's very interesting to have heard what the rest of the crew said about going in with one idea and then figuring out that there were other opportunities. The nice thing about signing up for a physics PhD, even if you have some interest in biophysics, is that you get to explore a lot of fields, right? And in part because it's more available to you, and in part because they make you take a lot of courses. Like typically physics programs will have a lot more course requirements than biophysics programs. On the other hand, if you feel like you're ready for action in something having to do with living matter, then maybe it's better to apply to a biophysics program and make use of the flexibility to not only take courses in physics. I've had biophysics students that take general relativity in grad school, so it's not that big of a deal to take courses in the physics department, but also have the opportunity to take courses in all the departments.
I also might say on the subject of physics versus biophysics, I'm in both departments and involved in admissions for both departments at Hopkins. And it can be, I think there's a really wide variety of what a biophysics program can be. So for instance, if you're a biophysics PhD student in my department, you might be taking courses on proteins and nucleic acids and structure and things like that. You would be taking things like some more biochemistry type courses, some physical chemistry type courses. And so that would be one set of things that you would take. Other programs, like I know at San Diego, you might have more like, a quantitative biology type focus, where it's like physics and then like quantitative methods in biological contexts or things like that. So there's a huge range of different scopes for this. So sometimes the program type is more about what's mandated than what you can do with it. In physics, you're going to be mandated to take quantum mechanics, stat mech, electricity, and magnetism. In biophysics, you might be mandated to take a different subset of courses, but you could still end up working with, the same mentor, and your mentor controls a vast majority of your experience in graduate school.
Yeah, maybe just to follow up on that as well, I think what we're hearing is biophysics programs do tend to give you a little bit more flexibility than maybe a standard physics program. There is some downside to it. I will say from my own experience, having gone to a biophysics program and not a physics department, that when you come out of it with a PhD in biophysics, you do have to do a little more explaining to people about what that means. People in industry, people in academia, because biophysics programs vary so much, they might not know what did you actually learn. Whereas if you come out with a degree in physics, people kind of have a picture in their head of what that means. I'm actually going to pause this for a second because we have some questions from the audience. Hossam, can you speak up?
Oh, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Oh, okay. My name is Hossam, and I have a bachelor's degree in biophysics, but my curriculum was a little bit different than the normal biophysics. So my question is, how you get accepted into a grad school for biophysics without being very specific about the topic you're interested in. Like, for example, my research experience is divided into working with invertebrates, studying biomechanics, and working in neuroscience, investigating autism in mice. Having two different techniques, but I know what I'm interested in, but I'm trying to get into a program where, how I can describe it, where first, I'm aware of what I want to do, but like it's pretty hard to be that specific. So how I get into a program without being more specific.
Okay.
That's my question.
Great. So maybe this is a good point to transition to the general question of what are grad admissions committees looking for in terms of past experience, techniques, what you might be coming in with, and this balance between having very specific experience and things that the department already does versus more general coursework or research experience. All right, so for all of you panelists who've been on grad admissions committees before, what is it you are looking for?
I can start by saying I think it's definitely less specific than Hussam that you seem to be assuming. You're coming in, people are typically 22. You could really be anything you want in life at that point. So we certainly don't pigeonhole you by, oh, you worked on vertebrates. That, you know, it's not even to the extent like you could have done, say, in the physics department, you could have solely done hard condensed matter experiments. And then in your application, say you're looking to go to biological physics. It will not be a handicap at all. What we're really looking for when we look at the prior research experiences is see that the person has engaged with research so that they know what it is, so they know they don't hate it, and that they have a good work ethic, they can finish, they can take a project from start to completion. And those are really the things we're looking for. Very, very, I mean, it's almost never the case that somebody comes in trained with a skill that's going to be directly useful for what we want. That almost never happens. And so it's not something we ever consider. That said, I would say, okay, so the only sort of rough counterexample to this is, you know, let's say a rough division between theory and experiment, right? Like if you've, yeah, there's certain examples where maybe it's a stretch too far. We have a, let's say your background, let's say your undergraduate degree is not in a quantitative science. Let's say it's in a traditional biology and you apply to a physics department. You know, we're probably going to think you're not going to pass our courses. And I know we have a biophysics program, like I mentioned, where people from different backgrounds can apply, physics and biology backgrounds. But one thing we do worry there is we want quantitative training and the ability to do biology. And so anyway, so that's the only constraint on your background.
So I can add, I mean, research experiences are really dependent on where you went to undergrad, what country you're in, and things like this. And we know that, right? If you're at a major R1 school, you have tons of opportunity to do research during the school year, most likely during the summers, et cetera. If you're from a school that doesn't have a lot of research, if you don't have the opportunity to stay at a school in the summer or do an RU, like we understand that. Well, a lot of times what we're looking for, and this is both in terms of courses and research, is that you were proactive in doing what you could given the resources that you were given. So you did well in the courses and you took the right course, you know, were interested in the courses and you tried to do research to the best of your ability. I would say by and large, most students do not do their PhD in something what they did their undergrad in, even if they don't switch fields. Because they did, you know, they happened to meet a group and they liked it and they stayed for 2 years. And that was fun. That was a good experience. But that doesn't mean they have to stay in that. And we don't expect them to stay in that. And as you heard, everyone here changed complete fields. That's very different. So, you know, as Armin said, we want to know that you like research. Because research is hard and research is different than class. And you know, if we have indication that you already dig that part of life, then that's really good sign that you'll do well in graduate school. But that you worked on invertebrates or bacteria, I mean, that does not matter basically at all.
See, Brian, do you have any follow-ups as someone who's gone to both biophysics committees and physics committees, do they look for different things or same things?
I think I think the general theme is true that we are more interested in the success in research than the specific topic. I will say specifically for our biophysics program, we pull people from a colossally broad set of backgrounds, people who I've had students who had an undergraduate major in physics or chemical engineering, or there are people who started out in biology who work in some of my colleagues' labs and things like that. And that's again, research type could, one of my students who just graduated did research on tribocharging of things like, how you get electrical charge for small particles or things like that. Very different from what he was doing with me. Other folks started doing like, quantum condensed matter problems before they came here. Again, success in research in general is a big criterion, but not too much in terms of specificity.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'll follow up on that saying as well. Also, at UCSD, we don't necessarily care what field you worked in before, what research project you did before. We do care what you say on your application about what field you want to work in. So we try to take it with a grain of salt because we know people change their minds all the time, as evidenced by the 4 examples here. But if you say, I really want to work specifically on neuroscience, then chances are your application will get forwarded to somebody who does neuroscience, and they'll be asked, is this a student you could see in our neuroscience groups here? So at that point, it's kind of up to you to say what you're interested in. If you say, I have been working on semiconductors, but now I am really curious about population dynamics, people will be interested in that. It won't count against you that you did something different. It'll just be a question of, oh, you're interested in things that we do. Let's take a look at the student.
One thing about that though, this is very true. We do care about what you say, what you're doing with this grain of salt, and it helps if there is someone in the faculty who actually does what you claim you're going to be doing, because we have had students who are otherwise excellent who said, I absolutely have to work on this one topic, like, I absolutely have to work on AlphaFold or something like that, and that's not something where there was an active area of research in the department that did that. And so that's something where, again, this is a proposal for what you're going to do with the next 5 years of your life. It should be consistent. You want you and the department to be on the same page.
Yep. Okay, so this seems like a good point to transition to the what should you put on applications. That is a good idea. So we've already heard some glimmerings of that. Please tell the committee what you are interested in research-wise. And please do look into the school you're applying to and find out if they are doing what you say you're interested in research-wise. What other suggestions do you guys have? It's a good idea, specifically at the application process, not just go back in time 3 years and do research, but like at the point when you're applying, what can you do?
Yeah, I guess I can follow up a little bit on what Josh said in terms of, like we want to see whether you made use of the opportunities, like we want to normalize by opportunities. But in doing so, when you talk about your research, what I'm looking for is there somebody I could engage with in a scientific conversation? Did they understand what they were doing, or were they just following instructions? Can they pose the problem? This is what I was interested in. This is how I thought of addressing it. Then this is what I did. It worked. It didn't work. But this is what I learned out of it. So I think it's very important to think of the research statement as a narrative of this process of scientific discovery rather than a shopping list of techniques that you used or things you were told to do. I think that at least makes a big difference in my eyes when I read one of these statements.
True. How about Arvin? What do you look for?
So like I said, so I just want to actually take it because I went, I think, a little too far in saying it really does. When I said your background doesn't matter, that still stays true. But as Brian mentioned, I've seen many cases where somebody applies for an area and we just don't have somebody in that. So one thing I think this you noted, this might be coming up later, but I think it does help to drop, especially in more narrow areas like biological physics, it doesn't hurt to drop an email to the PIs. We get lots of these emails. But if you think there is a particular resonance with the research topic, drop an email. Sometimes you don't get a reply because people are too busy. You shouldn't take that as a negative. But sometimes I've run into some people at APS that I kept in mind, and then I saw their application, and it does help. Yeah, so that personal interaction counts. Besides that, I mean, being on the committee, I will say, I didn't believe this when people told me, it is a I don't want to say a random process, but there is randomness in the process, in that if you poll 5 members of the admissions committee each year, each person rates different parts of the application. I know faculty who take the GPA very seriously. That's like the first thing they look at, what courses. And then there are other faculty who start by reading the research experiences, and sometimes don't even look at the GPA. So it's something to keep in mind and not take personally.
So actually,
I think that's a good point. So the statement of purpose, or whatever they call the letter, for instance, it's called the statement of purpose, is your chance to tell us what's not in the transcript, and kind of, or at least in collaboration with the letters, will describe you to us. Okay, and the standard thing to do is the first half of, the very opening is an opening. Please don't say you want to be the next Einstein, or you've been dreaming of Einstein since you were 5 years old. But it's an opening about you and why you got into research or into your interests. Then there should be a bit about your undergraduate research experience or experiences. And I think, as has been said a couple of times, we really want to know that you understood what you did, that you did things, that you weren't just sitting around turning the crank or something. So as best you can describe that. We then want to see a statement, a paragraph about what you want to do. If you can make it personalized about each school, that's great. But it needs to be serious. Like, if you just copy sentences from people's websites, this is not a good thing. You need to really engage and say something intellectual. And then something that I think not everyone realizes, the statement is also your opportunity to say anything else you want. For example, if you have a hole in your transcript, or there was a semester that you did really poorly for some reason or another, if there is some way that you can try to mitigate that, you can put that in your statement, right? I had a family member, let's say, that passed away, and so I just really bombed sophomore spring, right? Like, that's okay. We're all humans. We will understand that. If you don't tell us that, we're just going to see that you bombed sophomore spring, and we'll have a question. Why did that happen? If you tell us. So you can take this opportunity. It shouldn't be your whole statement, but if there is some sort of glaring red flag amongst a really great stellar thing, that's your place to tell us that, so that we know. And then another really important thing is if your letters can corroborate what you said specifically about your research. So if you seem to really understand, and then your letter writers say, yes, they love the lab and it was their idea and they did all this stuff, that is like the golden seal of approval, I think, for an admissions committee to read.
I want to jump in for just 1 second for a logistical thing that I think maybe we should mention at the start. When you apply to graduate school, the people looking at your applications will be faculty, will be people like us. The professors you will be working with, some subset of them is looking at your applications. So write them to scientists. Don't write them to admissions officers, HR people, whatever else you were doing in undergrad, right? It's not about your ability to spin a beautiful story with vocabulary about how since the dawn of time you've been interested in science. It's about talk to a real scientist and explain why you want to do science with them.
So if I can piggyback on that, if I can just piggyback on that, one way when we get these many hundreds of applications and have to sort them among faculty, one thing that we take seriously are names of faculty mentioned in the statement. It's not the only way, but so keep that in mind, that the research that you described there will sort of route your file to different people.
I wanted to touch on 2 things that were said. One is having you mentioned, like the applications need to be accessible. Like, if you apply to a biophysics program, the challenge is a little bit less there, But if you're applying to a physics program, you got to make sure that you explain things in a way that somebody that doesn't think about biophysics understands it. Because sure, what Arvin said of like sending applications to different people might be true, but I can tell you in physics at Berkeley, we get so many applications that there's a first layer where everybody reads everybody's. And, I can tell you how many, like, I don't know, string theory things I read that I have no idea what they're talking about. And I'm assuming the same is happening with the biophysics group. So I think that's something important to keep in mind. And maybe the best thing to do is to ask one of your physics professors that doesn't do biophysics to read your statement. And the other thing I wanted to touch on is, Josh was talking about the letters and, how we use those to corroborate that you have research, that the research experience is a solid one. And, so I think that emphasizes also that letters that come from research experiences are more valuable than letters that come from instructors, and everybody's agreeing. Like, the ones from instructors, I mean, they're useful, obviously, and they can speak sometimes to some unique aspect of your experience. But ultimately, we're really after I think that the thing that carries the most weight is the research letters.
If I can jump in on that, so definitely the research letters are one of the best, most weighty parts of your applications. If you don't happen to have 3 different research advisors to write you a letter, which most people do not, the course instructor letters that really matter are ones where A, they got to really know you, so it wasn't a 500 student class and you sat in the back. And B, some courses have things like projects where you have opportunity to take an initiative or show that you can do something other than pass a test. And those course instructor letters are more useful to us than just big standard classes. Okay.
Can I ask a question? Because I think maybe Brian or Arvin mentioned this. Like, what do people think about prospective students contacting PIs? Like, Arvin, maybe you were saying that maybe it helps. Like, I get contacted every year, and to the degree that I can, I talk to people. But many years I'm not even in the admissions committee, so it's not clear that it's not clear that it gets you a leg up in applying. It does help me understand who the people are, and if they get in, then we've already established a relationship. People know what the place is about in some sense. But I mean, like, I'm curious what other people's experiences have been.
So I can speak to mine, maybe telling a bit too much about how the sausage is made, but I do get a lot of these contacts. I almost always reply the same way of, sure, go ahead, apply to our graduate admissions. We'll see what your applications looks like. What does happen is if I'm not on the admissions committee and I get contacts from people who look potentially like they might be good fits, I might, when the admissions committee dumps a pile of files on me and say, hey, I'm actually interested in any of these, I might go back and say, hey, this one contacted me. They might actually be interested. Let me reach out and talk to them. So it's not sufficient to just contact the prof, but it might get your application pulled to the top of the pile if you made it clear in your email that there might be a good fit with a particular prof. The ones that just say, dear sir or madam, I am interested in biophysics, they get the canned response and it doesn't.
Are you taking students next year? I don't know. I think if you're going to spend significant time on it, there's better things you could spend your time. It's pretty stochastic, and in the end, probably a very small delta perturbation.
My view is that the students who I've met some students who sent me an email to contact me, who I then actually the ones who I remember are the ones who had interesting research, and I do remember a few of them because I see their papers later on, right? So I enjoy having that level of contact. If someone is willing to talk, wants to come and talk science with me, I'm happy to talk science with most people. It's not gonna the ones who contacted me and I remember how exciting their science would have gotten in even if they hadn't contacted me. I think it was pretty obvious. The one thing that genuinely, like, are you taking students? It's not much information, but it could be relevant because, again, if you're thinking about applying to a program where, again, you've heard this many times from us, your mentors matter a lot. You want to make sure that there are a large number of people that you could work with. It is a possibility that, for instance, 2 of your your targeted mentors might be out on, like, some sort of family leave or something like that, or that they have too many students and they're not taking additional students. So there is value to you for that. But I think that honestly, you probably are going to find that out more likely after you're accepted than after you apply.
Which is one more reason to apply to places where there's multiple faculty you want to work with, and not the one big name you are desperate to work with who might be retiring on sabbatical, whatever, that year. All right, maybe this is a good, go on.
I actually think when I tell students, that is the #1 thing when they get to the point of choosing a grad school.
Yeah.
Because there's so many reasons that you cannot get to work with the person you thought you were going to work with. And as a director of graduate studies, I've had first years cry in my office because they were dreaming in their mind of working with some PI and it didn't work out. And it can work out for so many reasons, right? Like that person leaves, as you just said, they're not there anymore by the time you show up. They don't have any money. They go on sabbatical. You love the project, but you hate all the lab people because they all work at night and you're a morning person. Or your advisor likes to meet every single morning. There was someone I worked with at Berkeley when I was a postdoc who had group meeting every morning at a coffee shop. And if you like that, that's great. And if that's not for you, that could be like a nightmare experience for you, right? There's just like so many ways. Or maybe you hate the science. You thought you loved, I don't know, the applications of machine learning to something. No, we already said AlphaFold. I don't know. You thought you loved microscopy. But it turns out you hate experiments because they're finicky and they don't always work and biology's messy and you want to be a theorist. So there's just so many ways it can fail. And if there was only one person for you at that grad school, then you're like really stuck. If there was 5, you're like, okay, that didn't work. I go work with Hernan now. Hernan's great. I'm going to work with that. Then I'll work with Arvind. That'll be great. And, so I really think like that is the secret sauce. You need options because you don't, it's just very hard to tell from the outside.
I agree. All right, so let's transition then to you've put together your best application and you've told them what you want to work on and you have great rec letters and you've sent it to more than 2 schools and now you have a series of acceptances in your hand. You have a choice to make between different schools. So how do you choose? And I guess Josh already said the biggest thing that I agree with, which is find a place where there's multiple groups where you think you may be wanting to work with those groups. What else would you folks suggest? What should students be looking for even when they decide, how many groups I would want to work with? Let's see, maybe Hernan, what should a student be looking for besides sheer numbers of professors?
Yeah. I mean, I agree. That's one of the main ones. I think Josh mentioned that also, the point of the excitement of the peers you're going to have. Because, those are going to be your friends. They're going to be the people you rely on for the day-to-day feedback. I mean, grad school is one of the last opportunities you have to get a built-in friend group in some sense. And so, like hopefully you can share some values in terms of the adventure of doing research. It is also true that, and I think this was touched upon slightly, that you're committing your 20s to doing science in general. Obviously, we admit people are older, maybe younger. So I mean, there's also aspects of geography that might appeal to some people versus others. It depends. To me, that was secondary, for example, in my decision making. But I see a lot of people where that's an important thing. Family might be relevant. I don't know. There's all sorts of factors. So that's another one that I think is important. And though I agree with and I encourage the thinking of multiple options that one has, I always remind students, I think I'm repeating myself here, is that all you need is one advisor also, right? So, and you can have multiple mentors throughout your career, but there's only going to be one PhD advisor for the most part. And that's also something important to think about when deciding where to go.
I can just add to that. When you visit a place, besides the number of potential mentors, you can sometimes try to get a sense of whether there is a graduate student community You could talk to the current grad students to see how much they're learning from each other. So within any research group, it's often you really learn from peers in that research group, more so than your mentor. And that effect is taken up to another whole other level if all the research groups in that area at that university, the grad students across multiple groups interact. And so you should try to get a sense of how much of a community there is among grad students. And someone mentioned also the culture of that, right? Because some places you go, you can tell people are sizing you up. It's going to be a certain kind of culture, and sometimes it's different.
Yeah, and you may like either one. I had a student, like Princeton is actually pretty laid back. I don't know if Arvin thought that, but I think it is. And I had a student once who hated it. He wanted competitiveness, and it wasn't there. And some people hate competitiveness. It's like a big turnoff. So, everything works for different students.
Fair enough. I think Hernan had something to add.
I just wanted to add, I think, what Arvin said in terms of talking to people, the people there, before joining, accepting an offer, and also once you're thinking of where to rotate, how important it is to interview people that have gone through the lab. And it's a tricky thing, but I think you need to remember that the things that people say are as important as the things that people don't say sometimes. So it's important to do your homework and your due diligence in trying to figure out what would it look like if I did my PhD with this person.
I quite agree. Okay, so I think we're down to 15 minutes left. So this is a good point to open it up to questions from the audience. If you guys want to pop up a hand, if you have other questions to ask, things we didn't touch on or things you'd like to hear more about. Hey guys, we answered all the questions. I feel proud.
All right, we left them speechless.
Class dismissed.
Well, maybe I'll follow up on. Oh, wait, wait.
There's a hand.
All right, Supriya.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I'm currently a graduate student at a university in US. I'm actually an international student. And do you have any suggestions or anything for someone like me who is considering transfer to PhD program?
What degree program are you in now?
I am in PhD physics. I'm doing
You want to
biophysics.
transfer to a different school?
Yeah, if
Yeah, so
I'm
in your statement, you have to explain why. Like that will look different, probably negative to most institutions. And so you need to explain why in your statement. And if it's compelling, and there can be compelling reasons, we've had students do this, that's okay. But by and large, I think that is like a orange flag, maybe not red. And I think you have to use that statement as an opportunity to say why you're doing this. Because, for example, why would we then expect you to leave after 2 years? Right. So you need to explain.
And do grades really matter?
Yeah, that's a tricky one to answer. They matter at the extremes. So if you have Fs in core physics classes, we will be taking an extra special look at that application. Like if there need to be other things that massively overpower those Fs. If you have B pluses in core physics classes, nobody is likely to care very much about it. So it's one of those, you need to be above some very vaguely defined threshold, and beyond that, research matters more. At least at my school, that's what it's like. Anybody else want to jump in?
Well, I mean, I would say that the trajectory also matters. Like if there was an improvement. But once again, all these things, like Josh said, are things that you need to do a preemptive strike in your statement of purpose and explain if something you feel doesn't look quite right, like why it doesn't look quite right.
I think that's generally true. If you have anything unusual about your path to grad school, maybe you're 50 years old, maybe you're coming from military service instead of straight from undergrad. It's good to just explain in your statement, like, this is why I chose to leave my 6-figure salary at Google to go to graduate school in physics. If you're doing that, just tell us why, and chances are it'll look well, but explain your path. Okay, more questions. Let's see. Gabe.
Hello, am I audible? Hello?
Yes,
Oh,
we can.
you're good.
Cool. I just had kind of I guess this is a more specific question, but I'm really interested in trying to do like protein design in graduate school. And I think what's really interesting is I've been like surveying around, and I feel like at every college there's maybe like 1 or 2 labs really focusing on protein design, at least like computational protein design. But I feel like it has a lot of like general applications. So like when looking like making my application, how can I make it come across that like I'm really interested in working in these few labs if I can specialize in protein design, but also interested in maybe applying it to different fields or like more applicational aspects as well.
So I have something that I think hasn't been said yet, and then I'll answer something more specific. Biophysics is kind of unique in that it can live in many places and many graduate programs, at least in the United States at different institutions. So what you want to do is go to every university, go to the website of every university and figure out where the type of science you want to do is, because it could be in physics, it could be in biophysics, it could be in bioengineering, it could be in chemical something engineering, it could be in applied physics, it could be in a variety of different departments and graduate programs, neuroscience, I mean, everything. So, you need to be careful. So my guess is for most schools with protein engineering, that actually wouldn't be in it certainly wouldn't be in a physics department is my guess. Maybe there's affiliations, but the core of that research would be in a more engineering discipline, which is fine. If that's what you want to do, then, that's where you want to go. And so that would be my suggestion. I like what you just said in that, if there are very relevant faculty, you totally should talk about them in your statement. But if you see your interests kind of overlapping with other faculty, I think saying that intelligently looks very mature on your part, intellectually mature. And that would be a really great thing to talk about in your statement.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to think about it. And like the other thing that you might think about there is like, again, like think about why do you want to do that? Like, because like the way that you said it was like, like I want to do this protein design and then think about like its application to other systems. So that would be one direction which might push you more towards engineering. Whereas if you were in a biophysics, it might be, okay, what are the fundamentals that control what shapes and functions proteins have, and then applications of that could be design, it could be different things and different things. So that's, again, one of those goals would be a better fit in our biophysics program, and then others might be better fit in like a bioengineering program. And so sort of think about the distribution of faculty in each of those programs.
All right, how about Naveen?
Hello. Sorry, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. So one quick question I just had was, what would you guys say separates a theoretical biophysicist from just a mathematician or physicist? Such as, like, if you're really interested in the math that goes on in certain models in biophysics, like if you're really into stochastic processes and you want to pursue those in a biological setting, then in that case, what would you say distinguishes a good applicant for a biophysics program with an interest in theory versus just an applied math program, for example?
Maybe if I can jump on this because I get asked this sort of thing a lot. So I would say what defines biophysics are the application questions you're studying. Like if you're doing biophysics, you have to be doing something that's being applied to living systems. What defines theory or physics is more the approaches, the fact that you are going to do math and you're going to build simplified models, or maybe you're going to do data analysis of certain types. And whether you want to go to a math department or a biophysics/physics/chemistry/insert here department, that might be based on, do you care about the application? Somewhere deep inside there, do you care about understanding some aspect of a living thing? If the answer is no, then maybe you don't need a department that has bio anywhere in it.
I'll just add to that it's important to sort this out because at least on the theory end, I think it is one of the dominant causes of tension or friction, because I think people come in these couple of different varieties, and the frictions come when person of one type is trying to work with the other. Meaning, are you there because of what the biophysicist would call just the method, or are you there for what is the scientific question, which you might call an application? These are two very different ways of looking at it. And it's true that in maths departments, you get one type, bio department, you get the other. In physics, unfortunately, you do get a mix. And so if you end up in a physics department, you should make sure you understand where your mentor's mental space is for this dimension.
And that's something you get by talking to the professors and the students there, because within, especially theoretical biophysics, you'll have a huge gamut of people who don't care about the methods, people who are very much on the mathematical side, people who will use other people's tools but apply them to their particular biological problem, kind of everything on that whole spectrum.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay, let's try Rehan.
Yeah. Hi. I had a question about the statement of purpose. You mentioned when you're saying what you want to do. Is that sort of which kind of field you want to play around in, which sort of model systems, or are you looking for us to say, here's a question that I've really like to answer? Do you want us to give like specifics? What's the theme of that paragraph, perhaps?
Yes.
Yes to all of them.
And whatever resonates with you, right? I mean, every student is different. Like something, died of this disease, and I know that there are these biophysics projects going on. That's good. I think ecology is amazing, and I would love to work in ecology. Also good. Like all these things are good. It depends on your situation.
I love stochastic processes and would like to know how stochastic processes would help me understand this biological system. All good.
Yeah, only if you include the second part of that sentence, though.
And it's also okay to say that I've had some biological physics experience, or maybe even condensed matter experience in something. I heard some talks. I want to explore biological physics, but I don't know what questions. Completely fine.
We've had very strong applications that say, like, I did past research in condensed matter. I like these types of approaches. But then I went to a seminar about biophysics, and it's great, and I really want to try it out. And that can work just fine.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. About Jessa?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. I am a third-year physics major at UC San Diego, and my interest actually lies in what I originally thought would be neurophysics. I really want to study the mind-body connection, but upon speaking with all of my physics instructors, they are kind of pointing me in the direction of biophysics, which is why I'm here in this meeting to learn more about it. But the research that I'm interested in trying to volunteer or get into at UCSD is in the anesthesiology department. So a lot of their work does come down to physics. So if there is a place for me in that lab, how would working in a non-traditional physics lab look on my graduate application? And could I continue working in that lab and get my PhD, even though it is not a traditional physics lab?
You want to stay at San Diego for your PhD?
Yes.
Okay, so it's a general statement. I'm of the opinion all students should move at every opportunity during training, because everything is different as you move around the world, the country, and I think you should experience what physics and biophysics means at a different institution. I basically tell all my students that, even though I think our graduate program is amazing, I tell them I think they should go somewhere else. I think if you can tell us why that research is biophysical to you in your statement, that would be fine. Like, it doesn't matter. I do wonder, though, if you applied to the biophysics program, you see.
Uh-oh. Did we lose Josh or?
That. Did I lose you? Anyway.
I think we lost you for the last.
Okay. Anyway, I don't know.
We keep losing him.
Go
Yeah.
ahead. I'm gonna let someone else talk because my thing keeps
Yeah,
stopping.
but I have to agree with Josh in terms of it's good to go to different places.
Maybe to answer the other part of that question about sort of working in non-traditional, non-physics groups, at least here what we would be looking at is can you pass our classes? So if you're a physics major and then you're working in the bio lab, that's probably fine. If you're a bio major and your research is in the bio lab and then you apply to a physics department, that's going to be a tougher sell. But other than that, if you can explain why what you did before is making you interested in biophysics, I think it would all work. But I will also jump on everybody else's saying that it's good to move. It is good to try different things.
Okay.
I'm going to agree with it being good to move. I think this is something where there's some evolution of thought on this. At least I think people are more aware now of people's personal circumstances, which like family ties might put you to one place or another, or different personal indications. Like that is something that we are aware is an issue. Again, like other people have said, because it's a little unusual, address it in your personal statement if there's a strong reason for it.
Let's try Nathan.
Hi. So I know that a lot of these biophysics departments are housed in like underneath the physics departments and therefore have some prereqs of higher level physics classes. I come from a bio background, so haven't really had the chance to take some of these classes. And I'm wondering if I should be concerned about that, whether I should look at other programs besides biophysics, if that's my situation.
This is something where it sounds like it will depend a lot on the specific biophysics program. For instance, the program that I run admissions for, the Jenkins program, and the program for molecular biophysics at Hopkins, take a broad background of students, whether or not you have had physics or chemistry in the past. So some of them would be good. If they are run out of a physics department, they will have the concern that people have talked about before about whether or not you're actually going to pass graduate level physics courses. You are not going to pass a graduate level electricity and magnetism course without having had an undergraduate course, unless you have had a lot of math along the way.
All right, let's move to Abby. Abby, we can't hear you right now if you are saying something. Oh, there we go.
Yay, okay, sweet. I think that it was kind of already answered, but I have a background in chemistry, and I was just wondering, like, have you had like any strong applications for people in chemistry departments moving into physics, and how common that might be to do?
But similar to what was said before, I think for physics department specifically, you would have to convince them you can pass the classes. Now, you might be a chemistry major who's taken a lot of the upper division physics classes. That could be okay. If you haven't, there may be some concerns on that. If you're applying to biophysics programs, I think they expect to draw kind of a wider pool of majors and different student backgrounds.
Our program would have most students are more likely to have a chemistry background or a biochemistry background than a physics background, actually. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's do, oh, wait, Yufei?
Hi.
Hi.
Oh, yeah. So I just wanted to ask if complex systems is too cookie of a word to use to mention what I'm interested in that began my interest in biophysics, because I know that this is like kind of maps to condensed matter physics, but because my university had some classes that are termed complex systems and they overlap, but it's not completely just the physics side. I was wondering if this is a word that people use in biophysics and physics. Yeah.
Yes, people definitely use the word. It is very helpful once you use the word if you proceed to explain which complex systems, which complexities, and why you're interested in them. I don't know what others feel about the particular term.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, don't use too many buzzwords without knowing why you're using them. But yeah.
I think that's it for questions, and it's exactly 1 o'clock or 4 o'clock on the East Coast, I guess. So this is a good time to wrap up. And thank you to our panelists for coming and sharing your experience and your advice. And thank you for that to the attendees. Best of luck with the applications and the grad school search and finding a good place to fit in for graduate school. And I guess I will find an end button.
All right. Bye, everybody. Good luck. Great seeing you all.
good
Thank
luck
you.
to you guys.